I do enjoy listening to you idiots.
Arsenal win back possession, and it's broken nicely to Cazorla. 30 metres from goal, plays it to the edge of the area. Alexis Sanchez goes for goal and scores. That's a brilliant goal from Alexis Sanchez. He's been Arsenal's star man this season, and maybe now they're going to get the right.
Hello and welcome to Gooners in the USA podcast, where we have now decided that we will only be featuring the women's or the Arsenal ladies team, who at this point, Mike, are bringing us more joy than the men's team.
Oh, yes. It was a beautiful day yesterday, but, I said I'm just going to be happy. What the fuck? This is not going to be easy, but we're going to try it, because today, Andy, I am surrounded by Andys and Andrews. This is one we've been looking forward to for a long time, but you don't often get to have a guest on who is truly an innovator in his field, a pioneer of industry, as it were. But this is the case today. Am I going over the top, Andrew?
Slightly, but I'm okay with it.
Yeah, keep it going. Let's keep it going. No, we didn't invite George Washington or Thomas Edison on the pod. We skipped the chance to bring Steve Jobs or Alexander Graham Bell on. I mean, for some reason they never got back to us. But someone that did get back to us, and probably is already regretting that, is the godfather of Arsenal podcasting, innovator and humorist extraordinaire, Andrew Mangan, a.k.a. Arseblog. So thank you for joining us, Andrew.
My pleasure. How are you?
Doing well. I wish we were doing well in all phases of our lives, but the one that we're physically, contractually forced to talk about today, maybe not so great. But nice, fluffy, happy podcast from you guys this morning, wasn't it?
Well, yeah, we can only deal with the material as it's presented to us by the football club and the football team and what they do on the pitch. They hand us the raw ingredients and we have to mold it into some kind of palatable thing for people to consume. I'm not sure that it's the tastiest stuff they've ever given us, but it is what it is, and certainly it gives you plenty to talk about, doesn't it?
Oh yeah, absolutely. There's no shortage of talking points. They're just they're not happy, fluffy ones. But and you've gone on record in a number of interviews and podcasts that I've listened to talking about kind of your history in podcasting. So we're going to try not to rehash that. I mean, we know you started in 2002 in Barcelona.
That's right. Yeah, that's when the website started. Yeah.
Excellent. And you're a name and a voice that's very familiar, not only in the UK and Ireland and Europe, but also here in the US. So, we've had a number of very good, very funny, very knowledgeable guests from the Arsenal blogosphere and podosphere and Arsenal drunkosphere and all the other spheres. And to a man, they all identify you as their inspiration for doing what they do. And, I'm wondering if you take pride in that, or if it just drives you crazy that, everyone and their mother in their underwear with their laptop somewhere in Denver, Colorado can get online and do a blog or a podcast.
Well, I think it's...
Andy's from Denver, by the way.
Okay. I was wondering where that was coming from. No, I think it's great, that people, if for anybody to say that they've been inspired by what I do is fantastic. I don't know why that would be a problem. And I think that's what's really quite interesting about the media landscape. More and more, it's become equalized, hasn't it? It used to be a case of if you wanted to get something published, you had to be, in a newspaper or part of a big conglomerate or a radio station or a TV station. And of course, the internet has given everybody the chance to publish their thoughts. I mean, look, it's not always stuff that you want to see or read. I don't mean just Arsenal, of course. For all the great, creative, interesting, informative, witty, funny people that create stuff every day of the week, there's millions more assholes doing it as well. So you have to take the rough with the smooth there. But no, if people have decided to do an Arsenal podcast or write about Arsenal because they're an Arsenal fan, because of, what I've done, then I think that's great.
Fantastic. And it's not just the podcasting that has you known over here in the U.S. I mean, there is the blog, there's the twice weekly podcast, but also your color commentator gig for NBC Sports a couple years ago against Everton is something very, very memorable. Have they ever invited you back to do a repeat performance?
No, they haven't really. That was quite funny because it was me and another friend of mine, Johnny, who were sitting right behind the commentary position, the commentator, and the co-commentator that day, I think, was Phil Neville. So, it was interesting. After about 20 minutes, this young intern guy, or he was a broadcast assistant of some kind, he just sort of turned around and he was ashen-faced. And he'd obviously been getting it in the ear from whoever's in charge of the broadcast, going, tell them to be quiet. You've got to tell them to be quiet, and of course we're sitting there at a game and we're getting into it. It's passionate. Football is passionate. So you're exercised, you're animated, and we were a bit sweary, of course, but that's normal. I don't. It was
the most authentic broadcast that I had heard in a long time, actually.
Yeah, so it was good. We toned it down in terms of the language, but we knew that we were being heard. So, we didn't stop shouting. We just stopped swearing. I think he offered me some sweets at one point. To see if I might eat sweets, maybe that would keep my mouth shut. But, I think they played that on Men in Blazers.
Yeah.
It was quite funny, actually. I tweeted about it during the game. I tweeted, oh, wow, NBC have just asked us to stop swearing. And within seconds, there were a load of replies going, oh, my God, is that you? We can hear you the whole way through the game. So it was really very funny.
I do actually remember sitting at home watching that game and just thinking it was hilarious that they couldn't get the sound down around them. I mean, the U.S. They're ensconced in these booths with plexiglass and soundproof, and you almost never get that. But the announcers are right there amongst the people, and you were the people that day.
Yeah, they're sort of on a little ledge below you, So we were in the first row of the upper tier in the stadium, and then below you there's sort of a ledge or another row of seats, which is where all the commentary positions are. Now, the TV stuff, when they go in and do halftime TV and all that is in behind the plexiglass. That's where, the studio is. But all the commentators are in the open air.
Yeah.
So, if you leave yourself exposed to that, then, it is going to happen where people are loud. It's a football match and they get annoyed or frustrated or upset or happy, and they're going to shout things, and it was only Everton. Like, I dread to think what would have been said had it been, Jose Mourinho or somebody like that, or one of their teams, somebody who you really hated. Everton are just Everton. You get into it, you want to beat them, but, the chance to shout things down the line at Jose Mourinho or Chelsea players or whoever it might have been at that stage would have been fun. Maybe I'll have to try and recreate that at some point, see if I can do it.
Well, and Phil Neville deserves every bit of discomfort that he can get, so it was just fine. Another distribution channel for your material, by the way. I mean, it's an oft overlooked, creeping in on somebody else's distribution is perfectly.
Yeah, I should have just screamed the name of the site.
Yeah, exactly.
Arsblog. People around America would be going, "What the hell is an Arseblog?" I gotta Google that, see what it is. Damn, I missed a trick there, guys.
See, we're giving you ideas already. So speaking of ideas, do you generally go off the cuff for each podcast, or do you kind of jot down ideas as they throughout the week as they come into your head? I mean, what's the process, if you can pull back the curtain a little bit on what you do?
Well, I mean, with myself and James for the Arsecast Extra on Mondays, it's pretty simple. We just start talking about whatever's happened at the weekend, whether it's a match or whatever's going on. We just start talking. We do that for generally about half an hour. Today's was a little bit longer because there was an awful lot more to talk about. And then in the second part of the show, we have questions that people send on Twitter and Facebook, etc. So that kind of takes care of the content for that podcast. For the main, the original Arsecast, I guess you would say, the one that comes out on a Friday, that is a little bit different. I'll obviously jot a couple of things down when it comes to talking to whatever guest or guests I have on, because, again, you're dealing with either a match that's upcoming, maybe a match that happened in midweek, something that's gone on. They're usually 4 or 5 big things that you want to talk to that guest about, and you have them jotted down, and you start the conversation. Now, it may go in a different direction. So I think one of the things that's really interesting about podcasting is that you can go wherever you want to go with it. So if you have to go off on a tangent, you can go off on a tangent, and you've got to be prepared to do that. So I'm happy enough to do that if that's the way it goes. But to start the podcast, usually I just put up the mic and start talking. The first sort of 7 to 10 minutes is me waffling on about whatever the hell comes into my head. Sometimes you have an idea of what you might say, or there might be, something going on that you want to touch on. But for the most part, I just kind of really make it up as I go along. That's the way it works, and that's the way it's always worked. There's no question of scripting anything really. Even some of the stupid things, the sketches and bits and pieces that I will do are just made up off the top of my head for the most part. So you might do them 5 or 6 times, or you might, so it's just kind of the way I work. I'm not terribly organized in that sense. So that's it. And then once I've made up enough stuff, that's it. It's done.
Yeah. Since we're relatively newer in the podcasting field, I tend to like to have a couple of things mapped out. And for some reason, they always come to me in the one of the places where I can't write anything down for a while. And it's in the shower. I have no idea why that is. So there are some weeks you can tell I haven't showered because our podcast is awful. You need a Sharpie or a tattoo pen or something that you can bring into the shower with you. Have one leg filled with podcast ideas.
I know you're eating in the shower, Mike, so you can easily take notes in there.
Look, if it's between figuring out how to eat in the shower and how to write down podcast ideas in the shower, I'm sorry, Andy, but our podcast is going to remain shitty.
What would you eat? What would you eat in the shower?
What would I eat in the shower? Certainly not a Baconator, because Wendy's refuses to sponsor us. So,
what the hell is a Baconator?
Every guest, Andrew, asks the same question when he brings it up.
Yeah, it's Baconator is pure heaven if you like bacon and beef and being
and a
fat.
heart attack.
Yeah, which is my bailiwick. But
I've just Googled it here. So the Baconator, for those of us listening on this side of the Atlantic, is Wendy's premium double bacon cheeseburger, and it certainly looks like
There's nothing that would make there's no moisture amount or soap that could make that taste any better or worse than it already does.
Like you can't go into the shower with a bread-based food item because it's just going to get too soggy.
It doesn't matter.
I agree.
So
I agree.
You have to remove the bun.
It activates the same enzymes that are in the stomach. Like I know what I'm talking about.
Is this a science podcast now? Come on.
Well, we do that one on Wednesdays, but
yeah. No, I'm trying to think what the ideal shower food would be. I don't know.
Thinking you could do something like frozen
soup?
Would be nice.
A soup that you maybe have a little more concentrated than it should be to begin with, so that by the time all the water gets in.
Great idea.
It's perfect.
That is a good idea.
It's like a super intense bisque, and then you just let random water droplets get in, and it takes its natural form.
Wow, that's good actually. I could see that being a range of products pretty soon. I could write this down. You can put on your leg as well.
Well, when I'm over, I'm going to be in London for the next 3 Arsenal games, and people watching on NBC Sports, be prepared to hear the product name that we're developing loudly next to the commentary, because I'm going to take advantage of that opportunity every bit.
Yeah, you better think of a good name, though, because you don't want to just be shouting behind the commentator, super condensed soup that you can eat in the shower.
I've got the whole international break to come up with a good name, so excellent. Well, this particular week, in hopes of a good podcast, I got in the shower last Friday, and I just got out about 5 minutes before we started taping, so hopefully it'll be good. But
smell the freshness.
Absolutely. We have to talk about this game, I suppose. Andrew, first of all, where did you watch the game? And number 2, when you saw the lineup, were you like me thinking this is actually a pretty good lineup for once? I know you spent most of your weekend in bars, but were you at one for the actual game? Or
No, I was at home for the game on the sofa with my laptop doing the live blog and doing all the work on the site that we do around each game. And, I looked at the team and thought, that's pretty good. That's a pretty good lineup. A nice, exciting, pacey, powerful front three with Walcott and Alexis and Danny Welbeck. You think there's a good range of attributes in there. Midfield, Jacques and Ramsey. I was all right with that. I wanted to see more of them and have them for a while. Back four was pretty much what you would expect. Keepers in. So you're thinking, okay, this is all right. But it became clear. Not fairly quickly because, they scored. That was worrying. But then we scored, 2 or 3 minutes later, and you're thinking, okay, there's a response in this team at least. They've got enough about them and enough fight for this game that they've responded really quickly. Oh, someone forgot to turn their phone off.
That was me.
Number
wah, wah.
Says he. I'm just desperately putting my phone on silent now.
Yeah, exactly. There's no doorbells going to be ringing in this podcast, I guess.
No. But look, it just didn't work, and I'm not sure it was necessarily to do with the lineup itself. I think it was a starting 11 that most people had really no problems with. Even the absence of Mesut Ozil wasn't something that people were too concerned about. But, the team just didn't work. They didn't work hard enough. They didn't do the basics well enough. They didn't fight for each other. They were far too passive. You have lots and lots of the football, but you don't do anything with it. And that's become the story of the way Arsenal play football at the moment. I don't even mean just at the moment, but over the last couple of years, lots and lots of sterile possession and not anywhere near enough incision and ambition. And, to get picked off the way we were picked off by West Brom, some of the counterattacks that they had were very dangerous. Mm-hmm. Some of the space they found in behind the defence was really dangerous. And you're thinking, how is this happening? Why are they? I know they're low on confidence, but they've got to be better than this.
Yeah. And we'll kind of examine a couple of the best or worst parts of the game in a minute, but at first I think we have to address the elephant in the room, the most embarrassing and shameful moment in recent Arsenal memory. I mean, we've been hearing rumblings about it all week. Didn't know whether it was or it wasn't going to happen. Then you tune in and you look up and you saw that it actually happened. How embarrassed were you over Hector Bellerin's man bun? Were you just ready to throw the TV out?
I really wanted to know, first and foremost, does he go to Andy Carroll's stylist? That's what I want to know. And is Andy Carroll the model of which he places his man bun around? And I don't know what I'm more disgusted with, the man bun or the little stash that he's rocking right now.
The combo is not good.
He always had that little wispy, a little Ronnie, as we call them over here. Yeah, look, I think he needs a haircut. There's no question about it. But
who's counseling these men? I mean, Wenger's supposed to be a manager of men, an advisor, a spiritual advisor, if you will, a hair advisor perhaps is necessary. But I don't think it was so much Andy Carroll. It looked a little bit more like early season Roberto Firmino. And, he's like, I just want to look just like that guy, except more rat-like.
Yeah, it's not good. It's not good.
It wasn't a good start to the day for me when I saw that, and then some other thing happened with some planes or banners or something. Seriously, though, what is your take on that?
I couldn't believe that the plane. I mean, it's embarrassing. And does anyone know who actually paid for or scheduled that to happen?
The first one or the second? I mean, obviously we're starting to hear about who the second one was, but I mean, I think it's people from amongst the same group of people that are organizing the protest marches.
So the Arsenal fan TV crew, which is crazy.
No, it's apparently not the people that you would suspect from there, but it's people that they know and associate with. I mean, it's not to be blamed on those specific people, but I do think that it's people from the same circles. It's obviously somebody who feels very strongly about it, but I mean, there's something different to me about the marches and the signs and the banners and a fucking plane. It's just It's a little hypocritical, and it doesn't make logical sense.
It can't be cheap to do it. Like, I don't know why someone would just want to invest that. I mean, it makes us look – it's embarrassing. It's an absolute embarrassment to see those things fly over. And then I don't know about the UK coverage, but watching it on television here, you could just hear the hum of the plane for the entire first half. You know, and it was just –
apparently it distracted the players. The hum of the plane distracted our players. Not their players, of course. But
for me, you know, when Arsene came out last week and acknowledged the fact that he understands that there was a march, he understands that there's discontent amongst the fan base, that was enough, I think, for the majority to say, okay, we're being heard, or at least they're being heard. I don't know if you had to go the next step with flying a plane, because I remember when United were doing that with Moyes, or was it Liverpool with Rodgers? Like we were all like, "That's a joke. That's embarrassment. You should hold yourself in higher esteem." And now we're all kind of lumped into that group together. And I don't know. I don't know if you guys feel different, but I just thought it was an embarrassment.
Andrew, you in support?
Look, I think the plane thing is fucking stupid. I really do. I thought it was stupid when Manchester United did it. I think it's stupid when Arsenal fans do it to protest against Arsene Wenger. And I think it was fucking stupid when this rival plane got up to fly a banner in support of him. It was like ridiculous. What are you going to do? Just fucking have a, shootout in the sky? Messerschmitts against Spitfires? World War II? I mean, what is going on with the world?
I felt like it was
fucking unacceptable.
I felt like I was at the beach, where they keep crab special, crab legs, all you could eat. 1999 was going to be the next plane that was flown over. But and of course, the rumor now is that the second banner was paid for by a Hong Kong company that has ties to Sir Chips Keswick, or as he's known here in the States, Sir Crisps Keswick. And if that's true, that's a little embarrassing and just surreal.
I don't think that is true, to be honest. I'd be really, really surprised if that was true. I mean, I know we're a clumsy lot, and this board aren't the greatest, but it would be astonishing to me if that was the case. I mean, it fits a narrative, you know what I mean? That people can see, why they might do that, but I'd be really surprised if that was the case.
The crazy thing about it, too, is regardless who funded it, a lot of those people are making their money off of the Arsenal fans who are clicking on their YouTube pages and creating ad revenue. So the more and more that we let these guys run amok on YouTube, they get the funding to do things like this to embarrass us.
Well, to be fair now, look, I don't think it is necessarily just Arsenal fan TV guys.
No, I don't either.
I don't think that's fair to put it on those guys. I mean, certainly some of them are very strident, and the best way, people can deal with that if they don't like what they do is just not look at what they do. Don't click, et cetera, et cetera. And I don't think anybody's making enough money from some YouTube videos to hire a plane for $2,000. My understanding of it is that there's a group of people who are fundraising and who are raising money from lots of Arsenal fans, chipping in little bits here and there to make these protests. And, that's up to them. I think flying a plane over a football ground is fucking stupid. But they're perfectly entitled to spend that money if they want to. You can't stop them from doing it, but you can view it whatever way you want. So.
Yeah, the plane is stupid. The pitch invaders with a sign is naked is much more classy, I think. We need to add more to that.
It is, but you know what? When it comes right down to it, the most visible, the most effective protest is empty seats in a stadium. That tells a bigger story, and it's quite interesting, isn't it? Because you look at the stuff that's going on in the Guardian today. I don't know if you've read it, David Heitner's piece in the Guardian about how the club believe that the people who make a lot of noise on social media are somehow a minority. That these people don't represent the majority of Arsenal fans. And, there is something to that. You can't go to Twitter and say, oh, my God, this is what everybody thinks whether it's Arsenal or whether it's politics or whether it's anything else. But I think they're very much missing. They're misjudging the situation if they think that it's not the case that a lot of people are very unhappy about this. And of course,
quiet doesn't mean happy.
Exactly, and a lot of people won't get involved in a protest. They either have too much respect for Arsene Wenger or they don't want to do that to their own club. There's loads of reasons why they won't get involved in a protest, but they might still want change, and even this is becoming a thing where are you protesting? If you're not protesting, you're part of the problem. That kind of shit can fuck all the way off. I hate that.
Yeah.
Because Arsenal fans are already divided enough as it is, but I just think that the club aren't necessarily in tune with the way that a lot of fans are thinking. And, if the football continues the way it continues or has been for the last little while, what happens, and it's inevitable in any sport or any entertainment, people will stay away. They bought their ticket, but they can't be arsed going. And the club might say, well, look, we've sold 60,000 tickets for this game, but yes, you've only got 50,000 in the stadium, or if it gets worse, you've got 45,000 people in the stadium. And that is when stuff has to be taken notice of, because you can't sell your football club and your corporate sponsorships and all those kind of things. You can't sell it to blue chip advertisers if you've got a half empty stadium.
Right.
So this is where I think that they have to wake up a little bit.
No, I completely agree. It's almost a catch-22 for us, because if a lot of people, what really pisses me off are the part of the fan base that want us to lose so change occurs, and I don't think that that's absolutely fair. We need to get behind the manager for as long as he's going to stay. I don't know how much of the pod you listen to. I think he's staying. Andrew, I'm not sure if you have insider information or you've heard different, but Mike and I have been battling this nonstop, and I just don't think that he's announced anything yet, because there hasn't been a right time to do it, because announcing it now is going to create another massive issue. And so I'm thinking they're hoping we go on a couple runs where we get some wins, and then he'll announce I'm going to stay on.
Yeah, I think that's probably right. My feeling initially when he made that statement on Saturday after the game, where he said, I've made my decision, you'll know very soon. My first thought was that he had decided that was that, based on, the performance and the fact that his team is underperforming and the pressure and everything else. I thought, that was that. And then obviously we get these stories, that all the newspapers are running that he wants to stay. I think it's a really, really difficult situation. It's almost impossible to announce it now. You can't announce that now. You can't announce that unless you've got something to show for it, like an FA Cup at the end of the season or top four. But, look at some of the games Arsenal have to play. We've got to play Manchester City twice in 3 weeks. We've got to play Tottenham away. We've got to play Manchester United at home. We've got to go away to Stoke. If we lose 2 or 3 of those games, I don't think that he should stay, to be honest. I don't think there's a case to be made for giving him a new contract based on what's happening. Wow. But I also don't see anything being announced or anything happening any other way before the end of the season.
It's going to get to the point where we take a 1-0 lead and they stop the game to announce it, because that might be the best time to discuss it. Like as soon as Giroud scores to open a game in a couple weeks or 3 weeks, they're just going to stop it. And because there is not going to be a good time to do it, which is why when he said that, he says, I know, but I'm not going to say it yet. And I think he said it wasn't going to be over the international break either. That to me was sealed the deal that he's staying.
Well, if he was leaving, it's an easy. This
would have been a perfect time to start.
Because then I feel like the majority of the fan base is united to give him the send off. But for me, whether or not he stays, on recent performance, we'll go to the West Brom game a little bit. When you're heading to West Brom or you're playing West Brom, the first thing the coaching staff sit down and discuss are set pieces, because you know how strong they are based off of how many goals they're scoring. I don't understand, based off of the 2 goals we let in, where was the coaching? Where was the management leading up to this week of identifying their threats and identifying who was man marking? You know, you cannot go into a match against West Brom zonal marking. And I know that Aaron Ramsey decided to stay on certain players, but we need to have our best headers man marking these players. And so from a coaching perspective, how did that not happen? How was that not a conversation the week leading into this match? And
well, maybe it was. I mean, is it a failure of coaching or a failure of execution? I mean, it was clearly a failure of any sort of execution at all. I mean, they could not have been coached. I mean, on the third goal, Giroud, Welbeck, Koscielny, Mustafi, and Xhaka all run and track 1 to 2 players who are coming closer to the kicker, and only Chamberlain and Ramsey decides to stand back and watch. Chambo puts an elbow in and then pretty much decides to go back and watch. And then you got 3 guys fighting for the same ball to score. I mean, the closest defenders, the only chance we had to keep a goal from going in would have been if their own guys got in the way.
Yeah, you know, look, they absolutely worked on that during the week in terms of preparing the team for set pieces. Absolutely. There's no question in my mind. The manager spoke about it before the game. He said, look, you know, we have to be aware they're very good at set pieces. What we saw were players not carrying out the instructions,
right,
not their jobs. And there's nothing wrong with zonal marking. Absolutely nothing wrong with it. Arsenal have only conceded 1 goal from a corner all season. So it works when the players do their jobs. And what we saw were players who lacked concentration, who shirked responsibility, who didn't do what they were supposed to do, who looked around at somebody else to say, well, why didn't you do that? You know, it was simply down to those players not doing what they should have done. Now, that's why I feel, for all the criticism of the manager, you've got to look at the players as well. They absolutely let themselves and the club down in that performance against West Brom, because they didn't try as hard as they should have. They did not give 100%. And I don't. You can say maybe we're not the greatest defensive team, and we have had our issues with set pieces, but we have improved. But when you see players just completely ignore what they're supposed to do, like Ramsey did for the first goal, and like Xhaka did for the first goal, who got out of his zone, and also Oxlade-Chamberlain and Ramsey for the third goal, like you can't put that necessarily on the manager. Those players have to take responsibility for that.
So does that highlight then the need for a leader on the pitch that turns around and screams at those players, so hopefully it doesn't happen again like it did? I mean, I can't believe for a moment that if Mertesacker wasn't in that match, he would have had heads rolling on that first goal.
Yeah, but I mean, you look at the reaction to the goal. You know, they're all standing around, they're all shouting at each other, they're all, you know, there's some of that there. I think it's to do with, I just think it's to do with the players. As I said in my own podcast today, for the first time when I watched Arsenal play, it struck me that the players weren't playing for the manager. And that's a big thing to say and a big thing to happen. And I hope I'm wrong, but, you know, they've been in the press talking about how they let the manager down and how they've done this and they've got to show, you know, more faith and all this kind of stuff. And then they play like that. That's where you draw the conclusions from. Not what they say, but what they do.
So do you think he's lost the locker room, as they say in the U.S.?
Yeah, I'm a little bit wary about going that far. I am, because, you know, I don't doubt that they want to do well and they want to win for him, et cetera, but it just becomes, you can see that by the performance that they weren't fully committed to that game. Whether he's lost the dressing room, I really don't know. We can't say if we're not in there. We really can't say, but, you know, it strikes me that the club is a difficult place at this moment in time. You know, where is Mesut Ozil after, you know, he's been sick, he has a back injury, conveniently after his agent says that he feels like a scapegoat, and all of a sudden Mesut Ozil is not playing anymore.
Right.
You know, Alexis Sanchez, all the stuff that's gone down with him. You know, there was a big problem with Alexis Sanchez the other week. There was an incident in training that wasn't good. So whether that's happy or not, you've got other players who don't know whether they're going to be at the club next year, players who haven't been offered new contracts. You know, the general uncertainty surrounding the manager. None of them know who's going to be in charge next year. Maybe they do know. Maybe they don't. Maybe they want somebody new. So all these things I think are feeding into the way the team is playing at this moment, and that was evident in the performance.
But it's frustrating with Ozil that he is injured or sick for the West Brom match, but is reported to the German squad for international. And yeah, you're right. It's just what's going on there. It'd be nice for some clarity because it's frustrating to see him play every third week. And then, like you said, some of the other players, like we should be re-signing Oxlade-Chamberlain. We shouldn't be letting this contract run down. And that's super frustrating too, because we're starting to see a player that's really finding form, and you feel bad for the kid because he's playing in 4 or 5 different positions throughout the season, but he's showing that he's excelling as a football player. And we're also seeing a player who's starting to overcome those injuries. Even last week when he came off with a hamstring, he's starting the next match. And so we're starting to see these players find the rhythm. The players that we've been desperate to see the last couple seasons really find their groove. And now we're worried about losing them to a potential rival. And it's just, it'd be shambolic to lose a player of his caliber if we're also going to lose Ozil and Sanchez in the summer.
Yeah, I agree.
Andy, you talk about the yelling and the accountability and the leaders on the field. You've made no small secret for the fact that you're expecting to see that more out of a quote-unquote leader off the field as well, and that would be Steve Bold. And the post-game commentary, I wrote this down because we don't have one of those nifty machines like you do to splice in the audio, Andrew. But I don't know if you saw this because it was broadcast in the U.S., but Kyle Martino hit the nail on the head directly after the final whistle. He says, this is just unexplainable. It's unacceptable. And the first thing I do is immediately look at an old Arsenal defender sitting right next to Arsene Wenger and Steve Bold, who I'm not convinced isn't a statue, and look for some sort of reaction from him. It doesn't seem to kill him. He doesn't get up and say anything. And the reason he doesn't, the same reason Alexis was punished, the same reason Thierry Henry left the club, the reason why Patrick Vieira is coaching in New York instead of London is because the voices of opposition are suppressed at the club. In Arsene they trust, and you can't trust Arsene Wenger anymore. It's not working. And, that goes to the consolidation of power under Arsene Wenger, is just to the absolute detriment of any other show of passion or demand at this lineup.
Is that fair to say that he sits there muted because of Arsene? Because I can't believe Arsene would be upset with him if he ran from that bench screaming to that back four and the midfield for not holding their zonal marking or falling apart. I can't see Arsene getting extremely mad at that or saying to Boldy, hey, sit back down, that's not how we do it. I mean, I just can't see that. I mean, you're giving up goals off of set pieces that we apparently practiced during the week. So someone's got to be pissed.
I don't know that he would be shouted down and said that's not what we do here at Arsenal, but I think that the overall tone of the entire organization is such that anything you do goes through Arsene Wenger. There's no decentralization of power or of authority to take any significant action up to and including barking at the team in front of your coach. And I actually question whether that's true or not. I think it might be looked at poorly within the organization if Steve Bull went out and did that.
Well, there are issues of character in the sense that Pat Rice was somebody who would certainly be a bit more vocal on the bench. Pat Rice would be a bit more animated. Steve Bold is that way because that is the way Steve Bold is. Right. It's not because Arsene Wenger is telling him to sit down. That's just the kind of character that he is. He's not somebody who's going to run up and down the sideline like Mourinho or Conte or one of those. That's just not who he is. But, the overall point maybe about Arsene having all the power is a very real one. But I don't really know, why there'd be sort of focus on what Steve Bold does on the sideline. Nobody says when Arsenal win a game and control a game that, well, it must be the calm, cool influence of Steve Bold sitting there, transmitting that, ice cold assassin jism to the players. It's not that. So it's easy to look at things when things are going wrong and say that's a problem, but if you don't say beforehand that you don't recognize it beforehand, it just seems a little bit off to me.
Well, I think Andrew hit it on the head before. It's easy to place blame on Boldy because he was such a great defender, and so everyone just assumes he manages that aspect of the game. But at a certain point, you have to place blame on the players for lack of discipline during the match to hold their zone, to hold their player, or what have you. So Martino can blame Arsene and can blame Boldy, but the players at the end of the day are the ones that have to get themselves into position. And letting in the first goal, okay, fine, but you can't follow it up and let the second in almost similarly to the first. And so I just think the presence of Bold being such a great defender is the reason why he's highlighted as being the main issue. But at the end of the day, like Andrew said, it's the players. The players need to step up, and I would love to see a goalie screaming at those players, or a Koscielny or someone to try and it's just the lack of leadership, I think, is also a problem, and it's something that we've been missing for quite a while.
Quick point there, though, just from the point of view of what we see on television isn't really the same as what you see when you're in a stadium, because you're not watching replays from 6 angles.
Right.
You're watching the reaction of the players, and it is, it's not like they just sort of nobody says anything. Mm-hmm. There are words said, and there are fingers pointed, and everything else. It's just that we very rarely get to see that. The only reason we might get to see it is in the immediate aftermath, if the camera's panning across it, or if it got really animated between a couple of players and they show a replay of that to go, ooh, look at these guys. But for the most part, they're not going to show the guys in discussion walking back up to kickoff after a goal has been conceded. So, we might feel or think that nothing is being said on the pitch, but, the reality is a little bit different.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's
absolutely.
a good point.
Absolutely.
And just after the game, his comments, I don't know that we need to pick apart the actual game itself anymore, but after the game to first of all, he did the post-game interview, not the one in the press room, but the one, in the little tiny room with the stupid advertising things behind it. He pretty much reveals that, it's a typical Premier League game nowadays. I was going to do the voice, but I'm not going to do the voice. The team that defends very well and plays on counterattack and set pieces. Okay, so he knew what kind of game this was going to be, and then he says, we pretty much work on the same system in every single game, and they do, and it boggles my mind that he just seems I have to hand it to him. He seems truly committed to the fact that he knows how to fix this, and he knows ultimately his way will bear out, but. To me, it just seems like the rest of it's like a 9-year-old soccer player who's dominating everybody, and then by the time he's 13, he's still playing like he's 9, and everybody else has grown up, and that's how it comes. And I have a son who's struggling with that right now, and he's got to work a lot harder to catch up to these boys that are getting bigger and assuming different strategies, and you have to evolve, or you get drummed out.
Yeah, I think what he meant there when he talked about the same system was that they use zonal marking from a defensive point of view. I think that's what he meant when we train with the same system, so that everybody is aware. I mean, on the one hand, we get criticized not being organized, and there's a lot to that. But defensive drills and working on the training ground and doing the same things over and over, repetitive training like that is what should, in ideal circumstances, keep you organized on the pitch. So I think that's what he meant, that we use the zonal marking system. It has worked well for most of this season, and yesterday, or against West Brom on Saturday, it went to pieces,
Yeah, absolutely.
But his body language in that interview, though, it was pretty much what you'd expect at this point. I mean, he seemed like he was kind of on autopilot and didn't want to be in that interview at all. And it just gave that kind of sad feeling like, this again. Didn't really cover himself in glory, but so moving on. The one thing I'm just bringing up, and this is only because I'm going to be at Wembley watching them for the first time on Sunday. The England national team choices came out. Ox makes the cut for Gareth Southgate. Theo doesn't, and Theo apparently was not at all chuffed about Southgate's decision. Andy, do you see a reason for that decision?
No, performances like West Brom have led Southgate to that decision because I thought for the majority of the match he was absent. He hasn't scored a league goal since December 18th. Since then he's scored one against Bayern and then Sutton and Lincoln. But I'm not surprised that Theo got left out, but I'm also surprised that Defoe is in the squad. I know he's been playing really well, but is he really going to be around at the time we're going to need him at the actual World Cup? So for me, Theo should have been put in the squad and given some sort of a role. But at the end of the day, I just don't know if his performance on the pitch have really warranted him making a call-up. Andrew, what do you think?
I didn't realize his goal scoring was that bad.
Well, I went to a website and checked
since September.
His last league goal was December 18th. Then he had the hat trick at Southampton for the FA Cup. Scored against Lincoln, scored against Sutton, and then had that one against Bayern. But since the league, it's been December 18th.
He's gotten in more arguments on the sidelines than he has scored goals since then in the Premier League.
And I know it's not always goals scored, right? I mean, he does a lot of other things with his movement, but essentially I feel like that's why he's been left out.
Yeah, I mean, maybe so. Look, he's one of those players who, in terms of his all-round game, is very often unconvincing, but he can get you goals. You know, he's 17 goals this season. Mm-hmm. I mean, he's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. You know, he's got sort of 7 goals his last 10, 11 games, which is decent in terms of goal scoring. And if that's what you're looking for in your team, particularly as England were a bit light on forwards, I thought it was a bit of a surprise that he wasn't picked. But, you know, ultimately, I don't care.
Yeah, well, because you're Irish.
Because I'm Irish, and I don't give a shit.
Yeah, and I can understand why Theo wouldn't be selected for the Arsenal starting 11, but with this England starting 11, that does surprise me a little bit. But anyhow, we got some user questions.
Okay.
I call them user questions because we like to think that people don't just listen to our podcast, but they actually use it for various things. I don't want to know what those things are, but we had to sort through like 5 or 6 different questions about crisps to get to the real questions. But I think we've done it. So, Andy, you want to get started with the first one?
Yeah, so Jackosaurus from, Andrew, you're going to have to help me with this, Tipperary Island?
Tipperary, yeah. I know.
He asked the question, do you think the club will give the manager time to fix things if he goes on a bad run? And
I have to say that was supposed to be new manager.
Oh, new manager. Yeah. Well, obviously they're going to give. I feel like any manager that is looking at Arsenal, it's the perfect position, right? Because you've got a global franchise, you've got a board that are going to give time. I don't think even post Arsene we're going to be a board where we expect 2 years out of a manager to bring silverware. So I feel like if we do bring in a new manager next summer, there's got to. I think he'll be given a 4 or 5 year run where he's going to be allowed to build this team. Now,
that's a long time.
Granted, if you bring in a manager who's constantly 11th, 12th, 16th in the league, then no. But I do feel like we have a board where they're going to give the manager the necessary time. And I'm only saying that because we're seeing it now. Like, why would that change? You know, if we brought in a Allegri, why not give him 2 to 3 years to build his team? Unless they give him a shit ton of money up front and he sells a bunch of our players and things don't work. But, Andrew, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think until it becomes obvious that a guy is out of his depth or it's not working, of course, they'll give him time. You know, managers come and go at clubs and clubs chop and change and, you know, there is this demand for instant success. I don't think that Arsenal are a club like Real Madrid or Barcelona or Chelsea, for example, who have such high standards that anything less than amazing or trophy winning is good enough. You know, you can look at Real Madrid. They fire managers who win the league and win the Champions League. Mm-hmm. That's the standards that they have there. And, you know, with the best will in the world, I don't think Arsenal are ever going to be that club. They don't have that. We kind of have this, what's the word I'm looking for here?
Stability.
No, not stability. You know, that kind of mentality where you don't quite think you're as good as you are. What's that called? Inferiority complex. That's what I feel like Arsenal has to an extent. That they don't, you know, you look at the potential of the club and the resources and the infrastructure and the stadium and all that. And we should be out there, thumping our chest about how great we're going to be, because we should be able to do it. But of course we don't. And, you know, that's maybe not the Arsenal way. But, I think they'd be much more inclined to give a manager time than some other clubs.
Well, and certainly the fact that I think in Barcelona and Real Madrid, if I'm understanding the process correctly, they've got essentially a chairman or a gazetist type figure who's elected and can be unelected. And a lot of times they're a lot more reactionary to player purchases and coaching changes to try to head off and to try to actually kind of politic for their re-election. And that's, I think, why a lot of things happen quicker over there. Whereas here, you know, the only thing that's going to make a difference is this kind of fan unrest and ultimately the bottom line. Yeah. So, you know, my personal fear, and the reason why in the past I've got caught up saying, you know, if we don't finish top four, that is actually a big problem, is because I could almost see the profit-driven balance sheet ownership saying, okay, well, we don't have Champions League football anymore, but we still have the TV money, we still have the sponsorship money for now, and we're still turning a big profit. We'll make the equivalent cuts on the salary side and on the transfer side and get comfortable being a 6th to 10th place team for a little while, and until we luck into a couple of, you know, purchases that turned into diamonds like Luis Suarez did when he was signed by Liverpool and those kind of things, and find ourselves back in the top four. And it might be a long time, and I do wonder how patient they'll be. I think they'll be too patient. But that's just me. Next question. Peter Kennelly in Australia asks, and we kind of addressed this with the lost the locker room content, but are the players revolting like the Chelsea players did with Mourinho last season? Andrew?
I don't know that we have enough evidence of that to say one way or the other. I think the reason the Chelsea players revolted against Mourinho, they were complicated. There was a lot going on. We know that as a character, he's pretty divisive, and I think it will be much easier to fall out with or to resent Jose Mourinho than it would be Arsene Wenger. I think for a lot of those Chelsea players, it became quite personal. And that's why they down tools. And whatever happens with Arsene Wenger, I don't see him having those kind of confrontational issues with his players. So it's too difficult to say just at the moment. But there were worrying signs in the West Brom game that perhaps some of the players weren't doing as much as they should have.
I think the next 3 games after the international break, which are, I'll be having a close look at them. I mean, we're going to learn everything we need to learn about this situation. I mean, by 3 games from now, we may be in complete tailspin, or we might be in one of these runs like after the Swansea game last year when I thought the sky was just completely falling, where we didn't lose again for the rest of the season, which was this exact phase of last season. We had just lost to Swansea and Manchester United and gotten knocked out of the cup by Watford, and it was all going to shit. And then we didn't lose again until Liverpool in August. So you just when the pressure is on, we don't perform. When the pressure almost seems like it's off because it's too far gone, then they surprise us. So who knows? Yep. Next question. Andy, you got this one?
Yep. AM Saturday asks, if players start leaving at the end of the season, what can we expect next season? And I think
less players.
Less players. But it's a tough question to answer at this point because we don't know the succession plan for players. We don't know who we're going to bring in, who we're actually losing, what manager will be in. So for that's a great question to ask or answer, in August for our first podcast next season. But, one thing that's been highlighted with Arsenal over the last, 10 seasons, 12 seasons is no matter how many players we lose, we're consistent with we will challenge to a certain point or we'll make top 4. Hopefully, if we lose the likes, ultimately, we've said it before, we're finishing the same pretty much now or maybe below with the likes of Ozil, Sanchez, Xhaka when we had Denilson, Ramsey, and Squillaci, right? So it all depends on what the manager does. If we do sell the likes of Ozil and Sanchez, hopefully he can bring in players that match like for like. So tough question to answer. Maybe we move that to the August pod, Mike.
Yeah, definitely. But if we lose players, we'll have less players. That seems pretty clear to me. Last question, Alfredo from New Orleans. Chelsea are about to win the league. Phil Collins is out on world tour. Andrew, at what point do we abandon this planet? I guess he's not a Phil Collins fan.
No. What point? I mean, look, I think if there were an option far away from this planet, if I could go into some deep sleep, some hyperspace and wake up somewhere much better, I'd definitely be considering it at this point. There's a lot of shit going on in this world.
Oh yeah.
That would make you depressed and make you a bit sad that you share that you're the same as some of these people, well, not the same, but, you're the same species or whatever. That's pretty grim. Chelsea winning the league, Phil Collins going out on tour, that's bad as well. Who knows? Maybe there'll be a cataclysmic volcano. That's all I can think of. We'll enter a new ice age, and only a very small number of us will survive. Probably Phil Collins and Chelsea will be the ones that survive, actually.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, and I think it kind of highlights the point that we get so frustrated with a football team, and at the end of the day, it's just a football team, right? I know we all live and breathe it, but there's a lot of other issues in the world we could really be focusing on, and if a lot of us are waking up upset every morning because of Arsenal, then life is pretty good for those people.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that, when we go back to what we said at the start of the conversation about people, being able to communicate and to chat with other fans and, using the internet and all that kind of stuff. I do feel like sometimes there's a need for some of these people to step back, just step back, guys, and realize that there's a whole big world out there, and how they get the energy to argue for 14 hours a day on Twitter is beyond me. It can't be healthy for anybody, and of course we're invested and of course we're passionate and everything like that, but you see some stuff sometimes and you go, come on, there's no, you don't have to go that far. This idea that you've got to be the worst so you can be heard in this crazy world or amidst all the online noise, some of the things people say and some of the things people try and say on our site, with comments and stuff like that we won't approve and won't allow, it's a bit shocking sometimes. But I think for the most part, sensible people can step back and view it for what it is and contextualize it at least. It's annoying and it's frustrating, but is it going to completely ruin your life? Nah.
No.
So are you saying I should allow my family out of the basement at this point after the game on Saturday?
Have they rubbed the lotion on their skin? If they have, then you can let them out. If not, you know what to do.
Yeah, I'm sorry. They're going to be in there for a little. All right, listeners, thank you for the user questions. Some good ones this week. And picks of the week. We can get through this very quickly because we have no picks to make for this week. But, boy, is something happening here, Andy. After match day 29, you're still in the lead with 73, but I'm creeping up on your ass.
Yeah, well, there's a time where you overtook me as well, and then once the adjudication process is complete, these have an asterisk next to them.
You can keep changing the rules. You can threaten litigation.
For anyone that doesn't know what the asterisk means over the pond, in America, when someone cheats at a sport and they hold a record, they put an asterisk next to it to let everyone know this person cheated at some point throughout the process.
No, the asterisk means that Andy is acting like an asterisk. But you can talk about your boy Eric and get litigation. It's not going to change anything. I'm coming for your ass. 73, 71, 67, baby.
He promised me that once he's finished with his medical boards, which his test was today, I think, so hopefully he passed, he will go back and listen to all of our pods from start to finish to adjudicate.
Your doctor lawyer can't even get his priorities straight. So anyway, I'm within two of you. So final thoughts, new countries. We have one, country number 67. Welcome to the podcast, Colombia.
Which is crazy since we had a Colombian semi-guest at the beginning of the season.
Yeah, did we?
Yeah, remember? Yeah.
I kind of remember back then. But yes, so thank you to Mr. Alfina. But I actually prefer to think it was Sofia Vergara because we need more sexy listeners, not just Joey Murphy. And we know it isn't Shakira because she listens to Barca in the USA podcast. So we're getting closer to that magic country number 69. So thank you, new listeners. Andrew, thank you so much for joining us. We're going to wrap things up. I know you've got a busy schedule, so on the off chance that we have any listeners who aren't already listening to or reading your content, what's the best way for them to find you?
Just go to Arseblog, arseblog.com, and you can find everything there: the podcast, the news, the blogs, the columns, the whole lot. So that's where you'll get it.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. Appreciate your time again. Any other last words, Andy?
No, thank you very much, Andrew. I was looking through my old email, and I found that and I've erased a lot, but 2010 was when I first got my first Arseblog email on February 3rd. So having you on the pod and chatting with you has been an honor. Thank you so much.
Oh, my pleasure. What happened that day? I don't remember.
It was, I actually opened it, and then I think we drew Chelsea 1-1.
Okay, so that's not too bad.
No. Back when times were a lot better. No.
Yeah, back when we could eke a point out of a Chelsea game every once in a while.
Right.
Anyway, listen, guys, thanks a million. Thanks for having me on.
Cheers. Thank you, Andrew. Come on, you Gooners.